In the beginning of our careers, we all think that being a manager is an easy job, and that could be the case if we know what we are doing. But most of the time, you don't know really how to approach a situation unless you have experienced that before. In this episode, we speak with Kevin, a seasoned people focused engineering manager that has been leading teams from the US to the Netherlands. And we'll talk about how he manages teams, what he has learned along the way, the weather in the Netherlands, and also a little bit about World of Warcraft. I apologize in advance about the quality of the sound. There was something wrong with this setup, so there is a bit of frying popcorns in the back. Hope you can still enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Away from the Keyboards.
It's funny you should mention the kind of the whole like production thing, because I also come from like computer science background, and then I spent a couple of years kind of as a programmer. Decided I'd much rather do design, and I went and did a master's in interaction design out of the College of Fine Arts in Carnegie Mellon. And that program was very much kind of focused on how you look at human interaction with things. So it could be like interfaces, but it could also be just like wayfinding and other types of like way that you interact with the world, right? It didn't necessarily have to be technology. So a really philosophical kind of program. While there, I got distracted and took a bunch of classes doing motion graphics and decided that was what I wanted to do with my life. Got myself hired at a studio with Kyle Cooper, who eventually went on to become the director of photography for Across the Universe, and like had done all these like really great opening credits and end sequences. And a week in, I was fired from across the room by email. Because as it turns out, I didn't have the practice for it, and the only reason that I had a portfolio to speak of was one, programming skills. I like built some of my own tools, and the second was that I would spend 4 to 5 times as much time as my colleague. And you know, when you're in kind of a high pressure environment, you can't do that, right? So after that, you know, like people go through their wanderlust period, and I spent mine at a Buddhist monastery in Germany. And then when I left there, I was like, I guess I know how to program. I don't necessarily think I enjoy it, but whatever. It's a way to make a living, right? And for me, it wasn't until I became a tech lead or like an engineering manager for the first time that I really, like at that point, I found kind of the spot that I really enjoyed, right? I'm not as interested in technology. I'm not as interested in kind of like solving problems with technology, but I really enjoy solving problems in human interactions and with like people and organizations. And you know, and within the last, I guess like five to 8 years or so, like we've seen a lot more discussions about mental health, about psychological safety, about like how teams can operate in a more empathetic manner, and how much healthier that is of a work environment. And so that's the stuff that interests me, right? Like, and the whole programming bit and computer science and IT for me is secondary to the people that I work with.
I didn't do that. You went to a Buddhist monastery.
I don't talk about it much because it's a detail that I'm like for me, like I had a really great experience there. But like for some people on the outside, they sort of see some of the things as a cult. And so it's sort of one of those things where I'm like, I don't want to get into the detail because I might still be in a little bit of denial, right? But you know what, like whatever. I got some value out of that experience, and I'm not a particularly religious person, and you know, I got what I needed out of that.
And when was that?
Oh, that was in winter of 2005 to 2006. So like my undergraduate degree was in 2000, and I started the 2-year program in 2002, and I finished it in 2005. And I just to mention that as well, World of Warcraft It came out in 2003.
That game has a lot of hours of my life.
I quit in 2010 or so, 2009. Best decision I've ever.
I think it was about that time that I got hooked into it. So maybe we crossed for a small little amount of time.
Maybe.
But you were probably level 65 when I was level 1.
No, I was pretty obsessed. For Halloween, one Halloween, I actually made myself a costume of like the actual set that I had, my character had. Like went and figured out how to do sewing and like everything, and went to BlizzCon with that.
Which one did you play?
I always played healers. Like my first character was a healing priest, and then when I played a second character, I played another healing priest. and back then, you couldn't change servers, right? So you just whatever server you were on, that was it. And if you had friends playing on another server, you just have to start a new character on a different server. So then my second character was a healing priest, and then my third character was a paladin, healing paladin.
So now the most important question: Horde or Alliance?
The paladin was Horde. The two priests were Alliance.
Ah, nice. My first character, I forgot what it was, but it's like that one that looks like a cow.
Oh, Tauren.
Yeah, like I could change into animals. And it was really cool because you're not really good in anything, but you have a little bit of rogue.
The druid.
Yeah, druid. That was it. Yeah, you could fly by yourself, which was super cool. Like you could run from someone, just jump off a cliff and then change into an animal that flies and no one kills you. So that was super cool. Then I think for a while I also played a small character as a rogue. I don't remember which one. I think a goblin. And then eventually the third character was a Dark Knight.
Yeah. On that expansion.
But then I was like, nah, enough. So what brought you here to the Netherlands?
The sort of the public answer, the polite answer is that I came here for a job. Right, I got a job at Booking, and they moved me. The real answer was that at the end of 2017, I had given kind of the political scene in the U.S. a chance. Like I was like, as much as craziness was happening, all politicians they'll sort of exaggerate. They'll sort of like say whatever to get elected. Maybe it's not going to be so bad. Maybe there will be adults in the room to sort of like, calm things down. And then one by one, Trump fired all of the adults in the room, right? So so by the end of 2017, I was like, okay, I want to try going elsewhere. And by that point, I had lived in California for 12 years. So I was like, I'm ready for a change. So with that job opportunity, had all of my belongings in a shipping container that went across the ocean. And for the first 6 months was pretty miserable because I had not only landed in like January, February, Dutch winter, but also learning about Dutch food for the first time. I didn't know anything about the Netherlands. I just knew that it was somewhere in Europe. That was kind of the way that I was escaping. And then coming from Los Angeles, right? Like everyone's asking, like, why? And I was sort of thinking that myself. But I'd always sort of thought that I was pretty multicultural. And it wasn't until I was working at Booking, which was like actually like multicultural, realizing that there was a lot that I needed to learn about interacting with people from different cultures. And then as it turns out, I'm way more American than I want to admit, right? Like I kind of just presumed, my parents are from Taiwan. Like I grew up in a household where they sort of like kept, practices, whatever. Yeah, no, it's like...
You're USA all the way.
Yeah. So as of last year, I got my permanent residency.
Oh, congrats.
And as of 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I got married. So like, I'm kind of like, even if I'm not here to stay, I feel like it's been a good move.
But yeah, you moved here in January. Oh my God, I committed exactly the same mistake. I came here on the 2nd of January, although Portugal is not really San Francisco in terms of the weather, but we do have a lot more sun during the winter than in the Netherlands.
Yeah. when I like for the interview process, this, before the pandemic, right? Like you would get flown in. So booking flew me in for 3 days, and I was here like the beginning of December. But like right before December, I had gone to a conference in Helsinki in Finland for about a week. So when I landed in Amsterdam, I was like, it was cold, it was winter, but I mean, compared to Helsinki, it was like, oh, this is okay. I can deal with this, right? And then not realizing that it's still not okay. Like by comparison, it's okay. But last week there was that brief bit of warmth that you could sort of like be, in shorts, like outside for a little bit.
So apparently the Swedes call that full spring.
Mm.
Yeah, after that second winter comes.
Yeah. And then now it's like, it's cold. It's so cold.
I was checking, and I don't know if it's tomorrow or the day after. It's going back to negatives as minimum. And like we had days of 18 degrees. Last weekend was 18 degrees. So typical thing in the Netherlands, talking about the weather, right? So you're fully integrated into the Dutch culture.
Although I think though, for me, the moment that I felt actually integrated, right, at least to Amsterdam, was the first. I've only hit a pedestrian once on my bicycle, and in all fairness to me, he's sort of like the guy was walking across the bike lane, and I kind of started going. I was like, okay, he's walking in this. I'll be able to go right behind him, right? Like we'll just pass like. And then he saw me last moment and then took a step backwards into where my bicycle was going. I flew off of it, landed on some motorcycles like that were parked on the side, and then he apologized to me, right? So that's like, I feel like a classic kind of like, how do you know you're an Amsterdammer? It's kind of thing.
Yeah, the first time that you scream at tourists on your bike, you know that you're fully integrated. Cool. So you moved here in the peak of winter, and then you started working in booking. Was that when you started already as a team lead?
Yeah, I was already a team lead there. Basically, I think like previous to sort of my interview as a team lead, they hadn't actually been interviewing, they hadn't hired team leads from outside the company. And I think 6 months before that, they had kind of officially ended the experiment of no team leads, right? So as a like the idea of an autonomous team is a really alluring one for companies, for organizations, right? It's like, if you have a team of people that are all kind of like contributing, then why do you need someone to be like a manager for like 5 people? Like that doesn't necessarily make sense. But when things aren't going well, you do need someone to be there, kind of to be able to spot that things aren't going well, right? People that are difficult may take a little bit more effort to sort of manage. And if you have like 6 teams, each with 5 or 6 people, that's going to be way too many people for you to actually keep, a focused count of everybody.
And what led you to become a team lead?
So the first time I got a promotion up from being an individual contributor was quite literally the day after they laid off a third of the company.
Wow.
So right place, right time, right? And I haven't kind of gotten kind of the next kind of promotion up because I have left places before the right place, right time kind of moments. Like I've apparently found a really great way of doing that. But like I was working for a company that did music streaming and had just introduced a video streaming product. So their idea for Rdio was that they had Rdio and video, VDIO, RDIO, and the 2 services were going to be eventually bundled up together. So you could get your music and your video from like one provider. Unfortunately, buying rights to stream video is a lot more expensive, like really, really expensive, especially if you want kind of current shows. And this was before the proliferation of like video streaming services, right? The only other game in town was Netflix. And this was before Netflix even started creating their own content. So sort of the whole delving into it, finding out that as a startup that might not be entirely sustainable. And the investor that had kind of dumped in a lot of his own money in order to start this business. He had gotten his money from the sale of Skype to Microsoft, and he decided to stop writing checks. So a week later, like he had said that he was going to stop writing checks. And so suddenly the company needed to try to find a way to become at least break even or profitable within like a year and a half. something like that. So a week later, the entire video product was cut and a third of the company was laid off, including like 10 or 11 out of the 40 some odd like software engineers. And my team was the content ingestion team. There were 4 of us, 2 that were working on the music side of things and 2 working on the video side of things. And there were 3 senior developers, me, the tech lead of that team, and also another guy kind of in a different team. We had been hired to work on the video thing, like explicitly. So the 3 of us got to do whatever we wanted, right? They basically, to one guy, he said, what do you want to work on? He's like, well, I want to work on music feed. So he got to work on music feed. Another one wanted to work on quality of service. So he got to work on quality of service. I had expressed an interest in becoming a lead. So quite literally the next day, they were like, so, your backlog has been cut in half. So would you like to lead this team? Like, we need a lead for. I'm like, if you'd asked me 2 days ago, I would have said yes immediately. Let me think about it, and eventually took it, right? And the team that I joined had 4 developers. We hired another 3 developers, and then there was someone doing operations that also joined the team. Yeah, I knew nothing about what leadership meant. I knew nothing about what management meant, but I just worked under the one statement of you can't make a software developer do anything they don't want to do. Like, especially in Silicon Valley, like 2012, 2013, era, it was still the kind of thing of people had choices, right? Like where they wanted to work and stuff like that. So I just only did that and things went pretty well. And I presumed that it was like, oh, I'm good at this. And it wasn't, until like another 5-6 years of realizing, no, I wasn't good. I just got lucky. I had a good team, like.
But sometimes that's all that is needed, right? At least to break the initial inertia to become a lead. And you're always afraid, like, how is it going to be now? Like, people will look up to me. If I try to tell them to do something, will they do it? If they don't, like, how am I going to react to that? So what was the biggest challenge that you faced in the beginning as a lead?
In the beginning, I think I didn't face any challenges in my first time. Like, I was there for a year and a half. And then at that point, I decided to sort of move down to Los Angeles. So when I moved down there, the second job was the first one that I kind of had a really, really rocky moment, because that company, the entire value prospect was technology, right? A streaming service. It's on the computer. That's what's getting delivered. Music is getting delivered through the computer. The second company that I worked for, called Zephyr, they were an operations company that happened to build technology to sort of help support it. Mm-hmm. Right? So what they did was they had YouTube at the time wouldn't allow anyone to sort of automatically do content removal, right? Like kind of like copyright marking. So you had to have a person behind the monitor to sort of like actually say, yes, this is copyrighted or not copyrighted kind of thing. And this company had basically made a deal with all of the studios to take down like full-length movies. And in return, they would sort of split the royalties for like short form, like clips, right? That you stick ads in front of, and then split the money with the studios. And as far as the studios are concerned, it's like, free money, right? Like, yeah. And then they also don't have to do the work to sort of pull down like actual content. And given that the 2 founders were non-technical, they were doing it purely from an operations perspective. And technology is kind of like the second tier, right? That was the first time I had to sort of like had to work with the business side of things, and also office politics, like in that kind of like environment, right? And within 6 months, I had basically alienated myself from all of the people on the business side because I was so trying to protect my team so much, right? And kind of like neglecting the whole managing your peers and managing upward. Kind of activity that you need to do as a manager.
Yeah, that's a common rookie mistake, right?
Yeah, right. And it's like, you encounter that once, and then it's like, okay, well, need to learn to do stuff better, right?
And how did you felt it was different leading teams in America and leading teams here in the Netherlands?
So there is a really big multicultural component. Like in the US, even if you have people from all sorts of different places, the expectation is still kind of the management style, and the interactions and stuff are still very much like rooted in American culture, right? So an example of that would be the delivery of bad news. The way that American delivery, you try to do like one or two like good things, and then you hide the bad news in the middle of it, and you do say more good things at the end of it. When sometimes we call it a shit sandwich. People know how to look for that, right? They read that, and you can't do that here, right? Like you can't also like if you try to make references like kind of like side references, which is also another thing that like American culture sort of does, right? Rather than saying that someone died, you say like they passed on, they moved on, like like kind of this like very gentle language, which sometimes hides the true kind of meaning, the true intent, especially if you're talking to people for whom like English isn't their first language. You can't hint at things. You have to just sort of say exactly what you mean. I mean, also the style of leadership, as much as like the American culture has this kind of the reputation of the whole thing of, oh, like, we like democracy and we like to have people vote and stuff like that. The decision-making process, even like the hierarchy, is pretty flat, right? You sort of, you might still talk to someone like a higher like hierarchy, or you might like yell back at them or whatever if like things are kind of getting like conflict is getting bigger. But leadership is still very much like the leader decides and then everyone else kind of follows or protests, right? You can protest a decision. Decision isn't necessarily final, right? And there's a whole thing of like American managers don't like to tip their hand, right? If they're going to do something, it's not going to happen until it's already like done, so that no one can have a chance to sort of say anything. So like things like layoffs, and the way layoffs were sort of announced to us at Ardio was quite literally at noon. We all got an email that said a third of the company had been laid off, told us what the names were, and that all those individuals had been told in the morning and would be coming back to like collect their stuff in the afternoon. Right. So like just like immediate, like no notice to anybody, just morning of, announcement, and then that's it. And then, and for us, since it was startup, so in the afternoon, we all went and like at 3:00, we went to the local bar and got plastered, and commiserated, with our coworkers that had just lost their jobs. And that doesn't work in Europe, right? Like that's horrific in other cultures and other places with employment laws and stuff like that, right? So Warner Brothers Discovery was the place I worked at like previously. They tried to lay off the entire European QA department in the middle of a release. No notice. The QA manager that I was working with was like, why is the PS5 not getting tested? And then she found out from her reports that they'd been laid off. Like it wasn't even her that sort of delivered the message. It was her manager that sort of directly like told them, right? They ended up having to sort of pay for another like 3 months worth of everyone's salary. None of the stuff was done with any notice, but also it wasn't because it was kept secret, right? It was sort of like all of these things in motion. No one was allowed to talk about it because they didn't want like anything leaking from that perspective. Very American way of kind of like approaching it, right? Whereas like the layoffs that are going to happen at Booking, haven't happened yet. But we've been hearing about it in the news. Like all of my colleagues, my friends who still work at Booking, have found out about it like in December that it's going to happen. Like they're kind of nailing down the details, but everyone knows that it's going to happen because that's kind of like part of how you do business here, right? Yeah, but I mean, and the thing is, I think like from a business perspective, there's always a whole, oh, we don't want the people who are like delivering like stuff to leave, right? Like the layoffs, even though they're always like, oh, we're going to do layoffs for business reasons. American companies very much do this thing where they will try to find like all of the people that kind of are not performing as well, that they couldn't actually put on paper like a real reason for them to sort of like fire them, and they say, oh, these people are getting let go for layoffs, right? Like kind of like the thing, so that rather than going through the effort of being like, okay, well, what's actually going on? Why is this not necessarily working? It's a shortcut.
Yeah. And as you led several teams over the years, what are the commonalities that you see in almost every team?
I think I dare say that there is a commonality for everyone, every individual person I've ever led. Not just every team, but like every individual person. And that is everyone is driven and motivated by things that are emotional in nature. And so like whether a team succeeds or fails, it's whether those emotional things are aligned or in conflict. And sometimes people will try to look for the alignment, And I think when you have a bunch of people that are kind of like haven't worked together yet, and they kind of come together, people want to find that alignment. Like we want to connect with other people, and then there might be circumstances that cause people to become unaligned, and then at that point, it's very difficult to get them to kind of come back again, especially if like someone feels hurt because of something else that someone else did. Right. I'm talking in very, very broad, generic terms, right? But I think this is one of those things that like we kind of forget, especially in tech, where we're like, oh, it's all about the product, right? Or all about the technology. And some people are certainly motivated by that. Where I've talked to individuals one by one, and then it's like everyone sort of agrees in principle to like a particular kind of like a technical solution or kind of technical direction. And the moment that you get everyone in the room together, one person says, I want this idea. Someone else will say, oh, no way. This is okay, right? Because there's something emotional going on and they have a 10 to 15 year grudge. So it doesn't matter what the technology is. It's that those two people can't be in the room together.
That's so true. In the end, it's all about the individuals in the team. You can pull in the technology, you can pull in all the stops, but if the people cannot really work together, there's nothing. So that's where the job of coach and a good manager comes in, right?
Yeah. In some cases, the best thing to do is to find another team for one of the people, right? Like find some way where they don't have to work together, especially if both individuals are actually contributing. This also ties back to the whole like American versus non-American way, right? The American way would be, fire one or both, right? Like, it's like hiring and firing is easy. So why not just do it? Whereas like if you're in a place where you don't have the tool of firing someone, then you start having to be a little bit more creative of finding ways that structurally people can be separated, right?
Yeah, and that's a good idea because if they are both good individual contributors, maybe in different teams, they will still provide good value to the company. So firing doesn't really give you anything back.
I don't think I have necessarily a favorite, right? Because it's one of those things where each one has its own different challenges. For me, like the biggest challenge for a performing phase is to not get bored, right? Like as a manager, it's like there's nothing to do. Then the norming phase, there is always kind of the thing that's nice is that there's already sort of a system in place, and then you're just tweaking. You're finding places to tweak little things to make it even better. Right. With forming, you get to sort of like go from complete scratch and stamp your own culture and kind of really set the stage for how people interact with each other. Right. Like people do very much end up mirroring their leaders a little bit, especially if they're having kind of a good experience. And then like storming is always an interesting challenge. It really depends on how it's storming, I think, whether I actively enjoy it. Well, I mean, sometimes a team is storming because there's one individual that just hates the company, right? Like as a manager, I've always used kind of as a conversational like anchor idea of even if you don't like the company, what experiences do you need within this team so that you can interview and have a narrative to take to the next place, right? At least if someone has a goal that's kind of thing, then we can work together. We can figure out how for me to get you what you want so that you calm down. You kind of like, like cooperate within the team. It's very difficult to do that at a company like Booking, that like if you work there, you're not going to get paid as much anywhere else, right? Like at least in Amsterdam. I had 2 of those people in my team at the same time, and that burnt me out. That's why I ended up leaving Booking.
Sometimes you can even burn out the manager that the manager needs to leave you.
Yeah. I didn't appreciate until after that point. Like I didn't value my own kind of like sanity or my own kind of emotional well-being highly enough, right? I was like, oh, like this is part of the whole job to sort of like try to make the team work. And at that point, it's like I needed to sort of disconnect myself, at least from those 2 individuals, and then start just, documenting all of the stuff that they were doing that was like difficult, right? Or pulling in HR to be like, hey, this is your job to sort of deal with. I have these 2 people that I would love for them to like leave. The thing that makes it so difficult is that with almost all of the other kind of like scenarios, there are very reasonable ways to get people to introspect on themselves enough to be like, oh, like I want to do this, or like I need to do this. Or for someone who's performing well, get them to acknowledge that they're performing well, or that get them to see that they're doing a good job and things like that. I've only ever seen once in my career someone who was being very difficult and acknowledged he was being difficult. Like after I left, I asked him, what would you have me do? And he was like, look, I like you as a person, but I expected when I was being difficult that you would go to HR for that. It's not your job. I was like, up until that point, I had thought that my job as a manager was to fix people within the team if I needed to, right? And that I could fix everyone. And that was the moment that I realized, no, you can't fix everyone. And if someone doesn't want to be fixed, then, trying to find a way for them to exit. Like this individual, he all but told me, and like after I had left, that he was very much bribable. He was trying to tell me that he wanted to be bribed, right? He was trying to tell me he wanted a settlement to leave. He felt that he was wronged. He wanted a settlement and then he would leave. But like, I didn't understand that. So, it's a live and learn moment.
And that's a good way for us to end with some lessons learned. A big thank you to Kevin for being a part of this podcast, the second ever installation. To everyone that listened until the end, sorry about the quality of the sound. I've been trying a new setup and this one didn't result that good. So hopefully the next one will be a bit more quality. Until next time, see you all away from the keyboards.